Mr. Haniotis, in the 2020 perspective, the future common agricultural policy will have a relevant impact on the European economy, environment and society. Which are, in your opinion, the main challenges the CAP has to face?
In broad terms, the broad challenges that the CAP has to face are economic, environmental and territorial. This is not something new because at different stages of the history of the CAP we have faced challenges in that terms. What is very important is to see in the concrete context of where we are today how these challenges play. In the economic challenges, what is new and we haven't seen in quite some time in the past is much more price volatility and much more uncertainty in world markets. There used to be a time where it was enough to look at the potential supply and demand of agricultural commodities, take a look at some of the macroeconomic variables, exchange rate or interest rate, look at what the trend in yields was going to be, and make some basic assumptions about the foreign policies of the European Union and the United States, and that could give you more or less the expected outcome of agricultural prices. Today's world is much more complex. First of all, it's not enough to look only into the yield trends. You have to look also into the uncertainties that are driven by climate change. It is not enough to look only to what the US and the EU are doing. The G20 is a completely new group, and sometimes we have even policies that were not faced in the past, like export bans. But what is much more important is that agricultural markets seem to be much more linked to what is happening in all commodity markets. As a result, agricultural prices at the world level have moved up by roughly 60% in the last 6 years. Fertilizer prices have moved up by 180%, and energy prices by 240%. So the level of prices is completely different than what we have seen in the past, and it seems that for the foreseeable future, the downward trend of agricultural prices seem to be something that we need to forget, at least for the foreseeable future. And this implies many things about the design of the future policy. The second thing that is also totally new is what is happening in the environmental front. We used to focus on soil, water, air, and look at their quality and what the impact of the policy is. We have seen that with the past reforms of the Common Agricultural Policy, we have managed to diminish the negative externalities of agriculture and also increase the positive externalities of agriculture. But now we have climate change into the forefront that brings new uncertainties and new challenges. And third, we have the territorial and the regional dimension of the CAP. We have seen with a series of analysis and studies, especially ones that have been done outside the European Commission, that the positive impact of the Common Agricultural Policy has not been so much on the level of production in the European Union. Europe always produced and will always produce agricultural commodities. The impact of the policy has been in providing more regional balance in this production. In the absence of the Common Agricultural Policy, we would have more environmental pressures in the most competitive regions, and we would have land abandonment in the least competitive regions. So broadly speaking, economic, environmental and territorial are the three main challenges of the CAP, but they present themselves in a completely new dimension this time around.
What are then the priorities for the proposed new regulation? In other terms, what is the main logic behind them?
The three priorities that are stemming from the previous challenges are to better target our support, to green more the policy, make it more delivering basic public goods, and also to bridge the gap between knowledge and practical questions, make the CAP more innovative and more competitive. In all the three broad options that we've studied about the future of the CAP, these type of priorities were there, but they were there with different weights. There are those that believe that the biggest deficiency of the policy right now is the imbalance of support between member states, and their focus was and continues to be on a better distribution of support among member states. With this comes also the logic that if it is better to harmonize the levels of support as measured per hectare, then this is logical to happen also inside the member states. Therefore, a move away from the historical model towards a model of support based on area, on land. There is a second school of thought, which is reflected in the final proposal of the Commission, that says, yes, there is an issue with a better targeting of support and a better distribution of support, but this has to happen gradually. So while we should go and target a more regional approach with more harmony among the levels of support between and within member states, we should also try to grasp this opportunity and better green the policy, both in its first and in the second pillar. That is, introduce a series of simple, rather small in number, but targeted across the territory measures that would enhance the delivery of the basic public good, environmental good of the policy, and better target the more specific environmental measures in the second pillar to and towards climate change challenge. The third school of thought we had seen considered that the level of prices we're seeing today imply that in the future we're not going to need income support. Therefore, we could gradually move away the support from direct income support to farmers, move some of this money back to taxpayers, and move the rest of the money towards more targeted environmental measures. All these three broad priorities of the policy were reflected in all the proposals we analyzed. However, it is our understanding today that if you look at the challenges that European agriculture faces, what the CAP needs to do is to find a better balance between the economic, the income support it provides, and the environmental, the support for the basic public good that it provides. And this is why we arrived at the combinations of measures that we propose.
Before making a proposal, usually the European Union carries out impact studies on its effects. What are the main expected impact of the CAP on the European agriculture on one side and on rural development on the other?
This time around we have looked extensively not only on what type of analysis we have done and what type of analysis others have done. We started by looking at the future expected outlook of agricultural markets at world level and in the European Union. And what we have seen from that is that with the expected price levels, the traditional type of price or quantity-based support, the traditional market mechanisms, would play a much smaller role than in the past. They will stay there in case prices have a very dramatic drop and provide a basic safety net of that type of support, but they're not expected to be the main instruments that will affect European agriculture. In other words, and from using more an economic jargon, we believe that European agriculture is mainly a price taker right now. As a result of that, most of the expectations of what is going to happen with our proposal in European agriculture focus around changes in the practices of farmers. How will farmers adapt to the need to green their level of support? And how will the move towards a more regional model affect the level of redistribution? We do have some answers in the first, concrete answers in the first type of approach. We know that a significant part of European farmers are going to be affected by greening. The impact is not going to be dramatic. The impact is going to be rather small on the average, but there are going to be specific sectors and specific regions that will be affected more. Those regions where the opportunity cost of keeping permanent grassland permanent is rather high will face more challenges, and those types of culture and farming practices that move towards monocultural practices will also have to make serious adjustments. For the rest, which is the great majority of farmers, the impact of the proposals is not expected to be high. However, one needs to keep in mind that there is one element that we cannot measure with our analysis, which is the fact that right now there is such a pressure on the cost of production that there is a tendency for farmers to become more intensive. So what we're doing with our policy proposals is we're stopping and move towards the past of the common agricultural policy and towards more intensive methods of production, but you cannot easily quantify this result. When it comes to the impact of a more regional approach, what we have done there is we have looked extensively on the potential impact of the redistribution of support at the member state level. because you can make different assumptions about what the new level of support and the new balance of support is going to be. And from that you can find out what the impact is going to be, and it comes natural that the member states that will have to reduce support more will have a direct result in their income, while those that will face a greater level of support will increase their impact. That's self-evident. What is more difficult is to see what will happen within the member states, because there the choice will come from the member states themselves, and we don't have yet a concrete idea how the member states intend to implement regionalization. What we have said in our analysis is that we believe that agronomic and economic criteria should be the ones that should drive such a decision, taking into account, of course, the administrative regionalization that member states have. The closer member states go to such criteria, the more smooth the pattern of adjustment is going to be, and the more this type of approach will come closer to land productivity. And then you arrive at a model where you can say that to farmers that face similar conditions, agronomic and economic, we provide the same level of support, whether this is for income or for environmental reasons, and the rest of their income should come based on their capacity to adjust to the signals that the market provides them.
A final question is on the budget. The Common Agricultural Policy will use anyway a lot of the money of the European Union, and the CAP will enter into force in a time of economic crisis, which imposes new priorities for the European Union and stronger justifications for its expenditure. How do you justify the funds reserved to the Common Agricultural Policy?
First of all, we need to be clear that, yes, the CAP continues to use a significant part of the community budget. This is a decreasing share of this budget. And second, the CAP continues to be a small part of total EU budget public expenditure. It is one of the few, if not the only, clear common policy, and that's why its share in the community budget is always significant. Second, we should not ignore the fact that the CAP really contributes with its reform towards a more efficient use of public money. We have moved more and more to the types of support that are least trade distorting. In fact, they are practically non-trade distorting right now, and address more the broader environmental and public good concerns of the wider European public. And this is how we try to justify the policy proposal we have made. Gradually, the CAP has moved away from supporting products towards supporting producers. It's about to make another major step right now, which is to move away from the support of the narrow 2% of the economy, if you want, towards the support of 50% of the territory. This is not just an agricultural policy. It is a policy that delivers environmental outcomes. It is a policy that we hope it will deliver climate change outcomes, and it is a policy that clearly delivers regional and territorial outcomes. And this is how we justify the need for this type of support.
Thank you, Mr. Haniotis.